Hello one and all, Carm 3D, you know where I am. I'm making this again for my students. This is a very simple rig. I tried to use as few bones as possible. I probably could have used less bones in the spine here. That's okay. So basically my intention of this video is just to show you the basics of the order of parental relationships with rigs. So I'm going to go into the scene editor and look at this structure here. First, this is the object itself. This is, the geometry. And generally, you won't even touch this once it's rigged. You animate the bones and the controllers, and the geometry follows along. You leave the geometry alone. The next layer down is the mover. Notice that I put guy_mover, and I did that with everything in the hierarchy. I do that because if you have more than one character, you want to have unique names for everybody so that your expressions or whatever they are, I can't remember the name of them in the cinema, can find it. Because if you just say arm upper, there might be an arm upper on one character, arm upper on the other character. It might get problematic. So anyway, this is the mover, and the point of this bone is really not for the use of animation. It's just to move the entire rig, so I can move the entire thing around. Next step down, we have all of our controllers. Okay, actually he doesn't need to be inside there. I should have moved him out earlier. And the next one down is the root bone. So the root bone is placed either at or just above where the pelvis is, and it's just basically a good center point for the whole model. You can use it for making him move around, for walking, doing somersaults, whatever. It's worth noting that this rig does not deform very prettily. That's because all I'm doing is using the distance from bones to bones to determine, how they affect the geometry. There are no weight maps in here whatsoever. It's just using the stock light wave mode of rigging, and there are no support bones. Typically when I do a rig and I'm doing it this way, I would use support bones. So I would have bones lining the bottom of his rib cage to keep that from being moved by the legs. So anyway, we got, as you can see, I can move him up and down, but the controllers are holding his hands and legs in place, hands and feet. And along those same lines, I can move the, oh, this is not supposed to be happening. Oh, I'm moving the bone. I wanted to move the controller. That's better. Let's look at that from a different angle, shall we? This is very simple. I did not give any kind of pole vector controls. We'll talk about pole vectors later. So I don't have total control over his arm. I just have a general control over his arm. And notice that the hand follows the controller. So you got two things at once. You can tell it where the hand is, and you can also tell it how the hand is oriented. And again, I'm going ultra simple here, so I am running into gimbal lock already. I can't even move his palm forward if I wanted to, unless I chose to use a world coordinate system, but I wouldn't recommend animating that way. Okay, let's see here. After the root bone, we have the pelvis. That's the next step down in the hierarchy, right there, pelvis. You can rotate this thusly. Actually, it doesn't seem to be affecting the geometry. If this was a better rig where it was, if you had wave maps or whatever, all the stuff I was talking about earlier, you would see him doing pelvic thrusts right now. And this bone going up here is a spine. Spine 1, spine 2, spine 3. That one, so the pelvis and the spine branch off from the root bone. So of course these guys let you control the spine, so you can grab some of these and do that kind of thing. Again, really bizarre deformations here because this is not a complete rig. I mean, it's complete enough to make it work, but it's not deforming the geometry very well. And let's see here. Spine flows into the rib. That's all one contiguous branch all the way down to the head. Now these controllers are direct descendants of the mover bone. So that's their parent. That way you can move the root around and the controllers stay in place. So they move independently of each other. Now the head controller only does one thing. It controls the orientation of the head. It does not deal with the position whatsoever. So what that means is, if I grab some of his spine bones here and rotate him, his head stays looking forward. Same thing with that. So you have independent control there. You can rotate his clavicles. His clavicles are branching off from, I think, this chest bone here. Make him shrug his shoulders, bring them forward, bring them back. Whoops, I'm rotating. You don't want to rotate the bank on the clavicle. There you go. You bring him forward, bring him back. Now, notice when I do that, his elbow's popping around. That's just because this is an ultra simple rig. And right around there, it's become straight, and it's having a little difficulty knowing which way to point. If there was a pole vector sticking out there, his elbow would always point to it, so that would be more stable. Of course, you don't even need to use inverse kinematics controllers for the hands. It depends what your character is going to do. If it's just doing a walk cycle, you really don't need it. You can just animate them by hand, and I can't do that right now because it's set for inverse kinematics. And there are also ways to switch between inverse and forward kinematics. This is forward kinematics, where you grab a bone and you rotate it manually. Same thing down here. His feet follow the controllers. And I think that's just about it as far as an ultra simple rig. So just to recap, model followed by the mover, followed by the root that branches off to the pelvis and spine. Pelvis branches off to the legs. Rib bone's connected to the clavicle bone's connected to the arm bone. So yeah, that's the basics. You can get much more complicated than this. I do that every time I rig. I seem to play around with getting more and more complex. Last rig I did, I gave the character scapula bones, and of course I go crazy nuts in the face, and we're not going to dig too deeply into the face in this course, but that's a whole other world in itself. Rigging the mouth muscles and the jaw and eyebrows and the eyelids and all that stuff, but of course that's where all the life is too, all the emotion. Not all the life, there's a lot of life in the body too. Body language. So yeah, I guess I'll just bring this video in for a soft landing now. Talk to you next time.